want to sit here and say you've survived the primary election season, but let's be real. This was one of the lamest primary election seasons we've had in a while. So if you're celebrating surviving this, I don't know. But hey, you know what? Participation ribbons all around. We have survived. And the good news is we're in the actual fight now. We're in the actual game now. It's time for the general election. Of course, we got to recap what just happened. So we've got a pretty awesome panel. I'm excited to talk about things today with our guest, Tom Demmer. You guys know him. He's been around a while. He's been on our podcast a bunch. He was a state representative. He's now president of the Lee County Industrial Development Association and a senior fellow at IPI. Tom, what's going on, man?
Hey, glad to be back.
We also have Mike Koolidge. He's the Ogle County GOP chairman, also the owner of Coolidge Communications. He was a congressional candidate himself and a radio show host, so he's going to be able to give a perspective from the candidate side. He has agreed never to look at the screen because we really, really want Mike to stay safe, but he's with us. So what's going on, Mike?
Great to be on again. Sorry, not trying to be cool with the sunglasses, but it's a beautiful day here in Illinois. And I'm driving back from Chicago for something political, which we can get into, but sorry about the mobile connection today.
Well, at least if you're bringing back intel that's fresh, right off the line, then I think everybody's going to forgive you for it.
I am, and I do.
Excellent. We also have Michael. We have Chris. I give them a lot of grief, so today I guess I'll be nice. Political experts, hard workers, I'll admit it. They did a lot of good work in this election. So, guys, good job, and glad to have you with us this week.
Good to be here.
Haven't had a good night's sleep in 2 months, Collin. Hasn't changed since Election Day. Ready to get back at it.
You seem like the kind of guy to me who just will never have a good night's sleep, even if everything's going well. So I don't know that that's that big of a deal.
My life is nothing but stress and misery, Collin, yes.
There you go. Well, as long as you find your way and to thrive in that environment. All right. Well, we're going to go through all the races and then we'll talk a little bit about what it means for the future. We'll do it one by one. Let's start with the governor's race. It's going to be a rematch. Everybody knows this by now if you're watching this as we release it on Friday. It's Darren Bailey against JB Pritzker. We can talk about this from any one of a number of directions, but I want to kick us off just by talking about how we got here, what happened in the primary, and then I think we can shift and talk about what does this mean, what's the race going to look like. I think if you look at the election results, you see that Bailey ended up right about where we thought he'd be. We figured he'd break 50. Well, most of us, but Chris, all of us who know what we're talking about, figured Bailey would break 50. We wondered if he'd break 55. We're still waiting for the final tallies. He hasn't quite broken 55 yet, but he's 53 and a half, almost 54 now. Dabrowski did overperform slightly. I'll give you credit on that, Chris. He almost broke 30. We'll see where things end up as the final election tally comes in. It'll be 28 or 29, somewhere in there. Mendrick also slightly overperformed, almost got to 10%, which is a couple percent more than I think many of us expected. Heidner got a lot lower than I think any of us expected. Most of us did not expect him to end up in fourth, so that certainly is notable. So your thoughts on how this race played out, guys, and what led to Darren Bailey becoming the nominee?
I mean, I think one of the biggest things was that none of the other three candidates were able to get their name ID high enough to actually even make this a race. Like obviously Darren Bailey's name ID was through the roof, right? He's been on the ballot statewide before, and then he was obviously on the ballot in 34 counties in a congressional district. A lot of money was spent both of those cycles, between the money that, the Bailey campaign spent, Uline spent through Proft, that JB spent getting his name ID up. So it was Bailey's name ID was sky high. These Dabrowski, Mendrick, Heidner, I would imagine their name ID was significantly lower, and it's hard. I mean, how do you get people to choose? Like, they didn't even know that they had these other options, let alone I need to look into the other options and make an educated decision.
Yeah, I mean, a number of people have made that point. It's accurate. Even on Facebook, when we were talking about this over the last couple of weeks, we had some sitting legislators who jumped in and said, it's hard to vote for somebody when you don't know who they are. And I think that was certainly one of the biggest factors in the primary race.
You guys tune into this podcast partially because you get two different perspectives on Illinois state politics. Butler kind of gives you the perspective of downstate, the rest of the state outside of the Chicagoland area, and I'm very much involved in the Chicagoland area. And because of that, my analysis that Ted Dabrowski was going to overperform was kind of half right. Dabrowski did very much overperform in the Chicagoland area. He won Cook County. He won the city of Chicago. He won Lake. He won DuPage. I think he won McHenry as well. It was all of the main suburban counties outside of Will, that Dabrowski was doing very well. And for that, I think he deserves some credit. The problem is it seems like he ran a pretty decent campaign in Chicagoland and ran a terrible campaign in the rest of the state. And that's kind of what I've been talking about the last, month or so, is that Dabrowski had a presence in the Chicagoland area that Darren Bailey didn't. And that's reflected in the election results. But what happens when you don't run a full campaign, when you don't gather all of the endorsements downstate, when you don't push hard enough in a state with 102 counties where downstate reflects most of the Republican electorate in the primary at this point, you need to get yourself down there into Butlerville. You need people like Michael Butler to go out there and do things for you. That's reflected in the next race that we're going to be talking about, of course. But Ted, if he would have ran a true statewide campaign, this would have been a race. But it seems like the only place where it was ever going to be competitive was Chicagoland. And a lot of the analysis coming out of the news right now is talking about that. A lot of the analysis from social media is talking about that. And I think it's very good analysis. It seems like Dabrowski actually ended up checking the boxes in the suburbs and in the city, but didn't end up checking any boxes downstate.
Chris, let me challenge you, but agree with you in the same breath. So you're correct. Dabrowski did very well in the Chicagoland area. That said, I think the Bailey campaign knew that was going to happen. Listen, 69% of Republican voters in a primary in Illinois are in the 96 counties outside the collars. So I think Bailey was perfectly happy to win those 96 because that's where 69% of the primary vote is. That said, I would say the reason is a little different than what you said. I don't think it's that Dabrowski ran a great race here and a horrible race everywhere. I think what you're seeing in those numbers being reflected is that Dabrowski had a ton of natural advantages in the region that you're seeing, and they ran an okay race everywhere, but the natural advantages lifted that to where you're seeing those numbers in the suburbs, whereas because they didn't have the natural advantages in the other 96 counties, you're seeing the lower numbers. My point being is that we've been saying since the beginning that Dabrowski has always been significant potential, but realizing that potential was a challenge. I don't think it was they did great here and horrible there. I think it was just unrealized potential everywhere, but it's the coulda, shoulda, woulda, because you see what they were able to achieve in the Chicagoland area. What if they had run that solid of a race? I think he could have run up the score in those 6 counties and made it a real campaign. So I think you're partially right, Chris, but I think the approach, your angle at it's maybe a little wrong.
Would you grant that it would have been possible for him both to get a higher percentage of the vote in the suburbs and still run a better campaign statewide?
Yeah. You would have seen the advantages everywhere, but the multiplier effect for him was in the suburbs. Whatever he would do to achieve 1 vote downstate would achieve 3 or 4 votes in the suburbs. So the multiplier was here. The focus should have been here, and he mostly focused here. So I do grant that, but I can tell you a number of people who voted for him in the suburbs who are people I know, but they're like, well, I don't know much about him, but he's not Bailey, and I hear he's my best option. It's literally what I heard over and over and over. So even up here, it's not as if everybody knew Dabrowski's name. He was running a super active race. Even up here, people were backing into it, but they didn't want Bailey, so they picked their best next alternative.
You're going to kill me for this, but I do think some credit does go to the GOP organizations that were backing Dabrowski in the suburbs.
Yeah.
And I don't think, and I've been asking people to tell me I'm wrong here for the last month, and nobody's telling me I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like Dabrowski had that downstate, where at least he somewhat had that as another multiplier in the suburbs.
Yeah.
I think downstate is kind of unique in the sense from a party perspective that a lot of these counties kind of shy away from making endorsements and actively backing, one candidate as an organization. So I think that happens a lot more in the suburbs than it does downstate. So I don't know that was necessarily an option. Individual
Michael,
precinct.
We'll talk about this in the next race for the Tracy stuff, but we also know that downstate, meaning again 96 counties, most of Illinois, but downstate, you can't buy that support. It's not the kind of thing you can come in and run a grass tops campaign and get support. This is what, again, in the Senate race, we'll talk about it. This is what Jeannie Evans ran into. It takes a heck of a lot of time. It takes showing up to meeting after meeting, event after event, kitchen table after kitchen table. That's not the kind of thing that can be bought or faked. So I think that's the biggest challenge downstate is when you start late, when you don't have a ton of time, you just don't have the ability to build up that support.
last point before I let anybody else jump in. You know what would have fixed that for Dabrowski? Had he picked a downstate person to be his running mate, maybe a downstate state legislator or state senator who's from very far South Illinois, maybe someone who said that they would be willing to do it. And just spitballing here, but that could have been a way to get into some of these counties now.
That and
100%.
starting earlier, but yeah. Tom, Mike, we've been dominating the conversation. I want to make us all shut up if you guys have thoughts.
So let me just, without rehashing a lot of the points that have been made, I think a couple of observations here. First is I think it's interesting to look back to when Darren Bailey got into this race. He would admit that at the beginning of this cycle, he was not maybe intending to run again for governor. You had a lot of talk. I mean, Mendrick, I think, was months and months before anybody else had announced he was in the race already. It kind of was apparent that he wasn't building the kind of momentum that he needed to really, clear any kind of field there. Dabrowski was talked about for quite a while, really delayed his own entry into the race for quite a bit of time. And I think Bailey rightfully recognized that without somebody else really kind of catching fire and starting to build that momentum, there's a vacuum there. Yeah. And Darren was very easily able to come in and say, I've got, built up name ID, built up understanding of Republican primary voters. I can fill that vacuum and, I really take up most of the oxygen in the primary debate all the way through the cycle, even as other candidates got in. With Dabrowski, who was expected, Heidner, who was not expected, ended up bringing out this field. It really, somebody needed to catch fire, and that just wasn't happening. And so the default was, well, people are going to go with Bailey, who they recognize. But the other point I think that I'd make on this is the Dabrowski campaign in their closing argument. That's where you really kind of see what people think their differentiating factor is. That's their best foot forward. The argument they were making was around electability. And I think that's a good point to make. That's an important thing to keep in mind in primary elections. I think that argument played better in Chicagoland area as well. I think that was an argument that was better tailored to Cook and suburban voters, Republican primary voters. And one of the reasons I think that's true is because if you get to a lot of rural Illinois right now, we have Republicans representing them at every level of government. They do have the luxury of picking kind of whatever Republican they want, and they're going to win general elections in those areas. Sure. We've seen such a dominance in downstate Illinois of Republican candidates that you haven't had to think that much about how do we compete in competitive general elections? How do we target swing voters? Because who wins the primary is who's going to win these gerrymandered congressional seats, these gerrymandered state rep and state senate seats. That's not the case in Cook and the Collar counties. They have to spend a lot of time thinking about competitiveness of candidates in general elections, so those elections aren't over before they even begin. And so I think that Dabrowski closing argument resonated with Cook and suburban voters because it was a better fit for them, but it's really just not something that downstate Republican voters have to think too much about.
It's an interesting perspective. We talked about electability as a message the last few weeks, but one thing we didn't talk about, Tom, is exactly what you said, that's just not something that many Republicans in Illinois ever have to consider. So it's a new thing. That's a solid point. Listen, I mean, we've talked about having the right message that can win in an election, and electability is one of those. But primary voters want to know, what are you going to do for them? How are you going to win? Dabrowski had that press conference the day before Election Day, and I get what they were trying to do. He's trying to show he has a winning coalition, and that's better than just saying I can win. But the people up on stage, it was a young Republican, a business owner, an old white guy who seems like he's got a really good message tied to, those who've lost their lives based on illegal immigration crimes. Tom Morrison, if you're trying to indicate, hey, listen, I've got heft here, I can win. I mean, it was a bunch of random people that most people have no idea who they are. And yeah, they were true. There were some females. There was some diversity up there. That was good to see. But if you're trying to say, hey, I've got the winning coalition in a general election, we were all waiting to see, what is that? Show us what that is, because you're not just going to win because you got, a Tom Morrison, a Jeannie Ives. Listen, that's going to help you in a primary, but tell us how you're going to win the general, how you going to take on J.B. Pritzker. And I think even that press conference the day before, I was like, man, what could have been in this race I've said it before. Dabrowski was my number one choice. I was pumped when he got in. I thought, this could give us a shot against Pritzker. Maybe that's why I was a little tougher on him than the rest, but there's just so much unrealized potential. I don't know if it's on Ted. I don't know if that's on, some of the people around him. I know some of his campaign team, the staffers, they work their butts off, but, we consultants, you can get good ones and you can get bad ones, and maybe the bad ones can sink a race. But I think this is going to go down as what could have, should have been, because obviously we all have concerns about Bailey in the general, which we'll get to in a minute.
What was really interesting to bring up, and Collin, I know you've said this before, that you need to do three things to win an election. You need to first let people know who you are, and then you have to give them a reason to vote for you, and then you have to actually get them to vote for you, bring them out to the polls. Am I getting those three right?
Yep.
Yeah. So something that I didn't hear anyone else bring up is the fact that Bailey is the only candidate who's ever run for office before. I mean, technically, I guess, other than Mendrick, who's run for sheriff, but certainly not a statewide office. But Heidner's never run for office. Dabrowski, Bailey, of course, had run this exact race 4 years ago. That definitely gave him a lot of advantage. And the thing you mentioned previously about, $50-60 million in PAC spending, which I was a part of, that helped get Bailey's name ID known throughout the state. He also, of course, ran for Congress unsuccessfully after his defeat for governor. That name ID, even in a loss, helped him for sure against Ted Dabrowski. About the geography thing, a quick little anecdote. I was at the Dabrowski headquarters for the election night, and the counties that came in first were some of the collar counties, Cook County, and I believe it was Lake County that came in first. And Dabrowski was winning. And early on in the night, there were big, loud applauses in the room because Dabrowski was up like 42% to 36 or something like that. Today, I was in Chicago at a fundraiser for Michael Whatley, who's running for Congress or for Senate in North Carolina. And there were obviously a bunch of people from both the Dabrowski and Bailey camps there. And I heard that the Bailey camp was the exact opposite. They, at their election night, saw the returns coming in. Of course, the Cook County returns were coming in first, and they got all depressed and sad because Bailey was losing, and they started to get pessimistic. We all know, of course, how it turned out. Their night got better as the night went on, and Dabrowski's got worse. But I think it had so much to do with the name ID that was baked into Bailey, and the fact that like you said, Collin, the Dabrowski campaign didn't necessarily start late, but they never really got past the introducing himself to voters stage. They tried to make the argument that he was the most electable, and in my opinion, he was. I did endorse Ted Dabrowski, but the fact that nobody throughout the state knew who he was outside of a lot of people in the Chicagoland area, that wasn't enough to get him over the top.
Mike,
my question, hold on, Chris, just for time, because we can't spend all day on this race. Let me take us to the next part of this topic, which is, can Republicans unify now? I know there was a big unity event on Wednesday after the election. A lot has been written and spoken about the fact that only 2 of the 4 gubernatorial candidates were in attendance at that unity event. So what are your thoughts? I mean, can Republicans come together? I've said it before in previous episodes that, Darren, of course, wants the party to unify at this point behind him, but there are still plenty of tough feelings in the party because it's not just from the primary race. Darren and Aaron and their team involved themselves in a whole bunch of other primaries throughout the state of Illinois. So there's a lot of hard feelings and many different levels here going into the general election. That doesn't just go away because you say, well, I'm the nominee, so now you got to be behind me. That doesn't happen. That's not how this works. So the question to you all is, can the party unify when it comes to this gubernatorial race?
I think there could be unity, but I think the other important thing is there's a lot of attention on some of this like inside baseball kind of thing and intra-party politics, things like that. Let's not forget that we had about 500. I know not all the votes are counted yet, but about 550,000 Republicans who voted in this primary. That's 200,000 fewer Republicans than voted 4 years ago, and we lost 4 years ago. And so, while it's important to bring together the party and the people who voted in this primary, it's also absolutely critically essential to bring together the people who have voted Republican in the past and didn't show up this year, people who think maybe they're open to voting for Republicans. I mean, we need we need a couple million on top of the primary voters. We can't spend too much time, worrying about some small percentage of people who are going to dig in their heels and say, no way in hell is this going to happen. We've got to build beyond this, because 550,000 votes in a statewide primary is not a great starting point.
Yeah, well, and Tom, obviously you've got statewide experience. You understand what it takes and how many votes is needed. And the reality is, it's a point I was going to make a little bit later on, but let's do it now. You saw Democrats more than 2-1 had turnout in this election over Republicans. Now they did have more excitement on their side. We've covered that ad nauseum, but the reality is this idea that we're just going to win, by putting a Republican name on the ballot. Right now, you have depression amongst Republican voters, and it isn't just everyone says, "Well, just get the Trump voters out." It isn't just that. There's a lot of people who aren't showing up because you haven't connected to them. You haven't talked about the issues that matter to them. There's a lot of people not showing up because maybe they don't like Bailey. Maybe they don't like Trump. There's a lot more work that goes into this than just going, "Ooh, get Republicans to the polls." Certainly, you got to do that. But beyond that, 78% of voters didn't choose to pull a ballot in this primary. So what are you going to do to reach them? Because at the end of the day, if they weren't willing to show up to a Republican primary, these are not hardline Republicans. You just got to give them a rah-rah message and they'll show up in November. Again, 78% of registered voters chose not to show up. It might be 77 by the time they're done counting, but it's going to be at least 3/4 of the voters in this state. So my question is going to be, if we're going to win, how are you going to get to those voters? And right now, this is why we're concerned about Darren as the nominee for governor. I haven't heard a compelling plan for how that's going to happen. They said, "Oh, we're going to spend time in Chicago." But this is also the same person who in the Daily Herald interview said, what we need to do is register people to vote, to show up to vote. He and his running mate have said over and over, we just got to get turnout up. We just got to get people to the polls. So yeah, you might show up in Chicago to some events now, since you skipped every event in Chicago for the last however many months. But that's not enough. If you want to get enough votes to win this election, Dabrowski just showed that there is an appetite for a solid, fiscally conservative, fiscally responsible message throughout the suburbs. But you need the right message, the right messenger, the right campaign. And so far, I haven't seen signs of that. Any of you, were any of you able to make that Unity event, or at least get some reports from how it went?
Yes, I was there, and it's true that Dabrowski and Mendrick were not there. And the tea I referred to is the fact that people said at the event that not only was Dabrowski not there, but that he never called Bailey to concede. And Bailey gave a very humble speech. He was not spiking the football. Neither was Aaron Del Mar. Aaron Del Mar actually apologized. He gave kind of a blanket apology for everything, stepping on toes and whatnot. But Ted Dabrowski, I saw at this event on Thursday in Chicago and asked him about the call. And he said not only did he call Darren Bailey, but he texted him and he showed them to me. And I asked him if I could tell this on this podcast, and he said, "Yeah, sure." And he's still kind of miffed about it. It sounds like Bailey is miffed that Ted didn't call him, and Ted is miffed that Bailey didn't call him back. So there's a little bit of hatchets that needed to be buried still. I think that will bring people together. I did see huge Bailey supporters hug Ted Dabrowski at this event on Thursday in Chicago and gave him a lot of and Ted was in a good mood, even with his loss. But I think that healing will start soon, but it's taken a little bit longer than it normally does in campaigns.
Look towards the general. So how do Republicans compete? How does Bailey compete in this race? Or is it a race? We've heard several people say it's time to focus down ballot. I mean, where are we in this gubernatorial race? Bailey, I'll give him credit, has improved his message. My problem is it doesn't stick. One day it's unity during the primary. The next day it was pick a fight with somebody. I don't know if it's Darren struggling to keep whatever new Darren exists, or maybe it's somebody else has the reins of the Twitter or Facebook account at that moment. And so it just looks like they can't pick a lane. But they've really struggled with sticking with this newer, better, humbler, listening Darren Bailey. But even if they get that right, even if they get the message right, because I think people forget Bill Brady, his message, even though everyone says, oh, he just talked about abortion. Actually, if you look back, his message was pretty solid. He was really on to the issues that mattered that day. He just didn't have the money or the communication skills to carry those to the actual voters. So Darren's message is much better, but you need the communication skills, and more importantly, you need the money to take that message to the voters. Otherwise, Pritzker's going to bury you in ads like the one he's already put out there on socials. He's just going to bury you on stuff you said 4 years ago. And it may be true that you're saying different things today, but if no voters see that, they just see the rehashed clips because Pritzker just keeps putting it on their TVs. It isn't going to matter that you're a different human being. So are we going to be able to see some fundraising out of this candidate? I know he talked to, I think it was Fingston, who asked him how his fundraising is going to look, and he said, Heidner's going to be there for me. I think I've heard that Heidner's going to maybe host some fundraisers, which is awesome. But most of Heidner's fundraising was from himself. So is Heidner going to cut a check, or is he just going to host fundraisers? Is a question I have. And he said Uline's going to be in for him again. I was like, well, Uline wasn't really for you 4 years ago. He gave it to Prof, didn't really give it to you. So I have a lot of concerns here about this idea that suddenly, because we're magically past the primary, the fundraising is going to pick up, and that's what we need to see from a gubernatorial candidate. Because Fingston said it right on his radio show. Bailey raised less than many state rep candidates raised in the gubernatorial race. That obviously isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, money's going to be a real challenge for anybody running statewide in Illinois right now. I think we're especially with the prospect of it's not just go out there and try to find people who are willing to write a check, but those people are thinking about, okay, I'm going to write you a 6-figure check, and JB's going to come in with an 8-figure check, right, and sort of swamp any kind of contribution that you're making. So people are looking at it on both sides of that. And while I think it's going to be important that the Bailey campaign tries to maximize opportunities for earned media, you're going to have to tell a story in a little different way. You're going to have to choose maybe an unconventional approach to things without getting full on campaign gimmick world. This is going to have to be a campaign that relies upon things outside of just normal messaging and political strategy. You've got to take a few risks. You got to put yourself out there in a few things. You got to try to shake up the field a little bit, because if you run a classic campaign hitting JB on the same kind of things you've hit him on before, I don't know how you could reasonably expect that the result would be different.
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, the message has to be, it has improved, but I'd like to see the perspective on the message improve, the theme improve. What I mean by this is anyone can copy paste an affordability message from somebody and go say it from the campaign trail. But if you look at his interviews, Bailey talks a lot about how things are a lot worse today than they were 8 years ago. People are frustrated. Let me see if I can read some of this. I have some notes here. Things are so bad that they're gonna have a desire to do something different, and what do they have to lose? And the budget's growing, schools are failing, we got to do something with the Safety Act. It's a lot of the same stuff that misses the mark. And I think this is what we see with a lot of politicos who don't do politics in the suburbs. They think, because from their perspective, everybody hates Illinois, everybody's pissed, everybody's frustrated, they can't stand Pritzker, so they think all the voters are that way. Like, come spend a minute in the suburbs. Like, yeah, people are frustrated with how things are going, but they don't connect those dots to Pritzker, and they're not unhappy like you think they are. They're not angry like you think they are. Maybe a few of your friends who happen to live up here, those are the few that do. But I got all the data in front of me. This idea that people are begging for a savior in the suburbs is not accurate. That's not how things are right now in the suburbs. Now, could the right message win in the suburbs? Absolutely. Could the right candidate win in the suburbs? Absolutely. Because you need to be able to connect those dots for them, but they haven't done it yet. They still think Pritzker's great. They still think things are just fine. Pritzker's weaker in the suburbs, and he's vulnerable in the suburbs. But this idea that the voters are just sitting around waiting for a savior because they're so pissed off, they're just waiting to know, oh, it's Bailey, great, I'm for you. I think they're going to need to figure this out here, that's not actually how the suburbs feels.
Yeah, I think Tom kind of hit it on the head about unconventionality. This really what is going to have to happen here with Bailey. He is going to be outspent no matter what. He has 10, 12 points to break through from last time. And certain things outside of his control might happen that might benefit him. And he needs to squeeze into that lane of Pritzker saying something really stupid, his approval getting less and less. Everyone knows who Davy Pritzker is, and Darren Bailey doesn't have to remind everyone who he is. So there might be a point where he reaches enough people in the Chicagoland area, and I know he's said that he learned a lot from his campaign last time. He is just camping out. I went to an event in Carroll County a couple weeks ago. Aaron Del Mar said, guys, this is the last you're going to see of us after we win the primary. We're not coming out downstate. We're not going to smaller counties. We're staying in the Chicagoland area the entire general election campaign. And remember, too, there's 4 extra months now than there was in 2022 with a much longer general election season. So chipping away. People might have Pritzker fatigue. There is a lane, but it might have to come from unconventional ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'll point you to something that Darren said in his his interview with Finkston. They were talking about Proft, and you guys can go watch that if you want to hear that whole exchange. But he was talking about how he wasn't going to hand over control of his race in 2022 because he was going to stay loyal to his team, which that I understand. But then he said this because we win primaries, and I was like, that is the perfect phrase for Darren and his team. They win primaries. We're going to talk about some of them here on this podcast, but now it's time to win a general election. And I think you're going to need people who know how to do that. We're going to need candidates who know how to do that. It's a whole different ballgame to win a general election. And we're going to need to learn that as Republicans fast because November, your Mike's right. We got a little more time than we did 4 years ago, but November is going to come faster than people realize. All right, let's look over the Pritzker side. So he's already started attacking Darren Bailey. We talked about the ad that Pritzker put out. He's obviously all Trump. That's going to be, his big thing. They sent a couple trucks to circle the Unity breakfast with some anti-Darren Bailey messaging from, his opponents in the primary and other people. You talk about unconventional. It looks like, Pritzker's going to get in the mud on this one and do whatever it takes to push Bailey down, which people have made that point that because of the fact that Pritzker wants to be president, he needs to beat Bailey by as much as possible. Every percent he gains further jumpstarts his national ambitions in the next round of elections. So this is not going to be a situation where Pritzker sees, oh, look, I'm up big, I'm going to just leave it alone, nor is that Pritzker's style. So they're going to go hard. And as you see, Pritzker has 2 different TV ads now out right now. He's got one where he's going after Darren Bailey. I don't know if that's on TV. That might just be digital. It's a 60-second one. It's too long. It's not great, to be honest. But then he's got a pretty good ad for 30-second TV ad where he's basically just running against Trump, all focused on Trump. They're all in on Wednesday, Thursday, first couple of days of this race. So thoughts on how Pritzker's gonna do this race and what the general election contest will look like before we finally move on to our next topic.
I mean, I think you're spot on. He's going to try to run the score up as much as he possibly can because he thinks it gives him more credibility on the national stage when he's running for president. And, oh, man, he won by, 18 points. He must be the greatest governor Illinois has ever seen, yada, yada, yada. I mean, that's the argument they're going to try to make. But I think it's going to be interesting to see with some of these other races. He went all in on U.S. Senate. He went all in on Comptroller for those candidates. And is he gonna, feel like he needs to continue to bankroll those if, Juliana Stratton or Margaret Croke starts to, falter a little bit?
Yeah.
It's a gamble, I think, on his part.
I think the prospect of if they really feel like they need to run up the score quite a bit, that's where Michael's point about Darren being ready to capitalize on a mistake from the Pritzker campaign comes in. Because if you're in the mode of reaching for every possible point and trying to run the score up, you're going to be putting yourself in a more vulnerable or risky position. Maybe you get out a little too far out on a branch. Maybe you reach a little too far on something. You've got to be ready and able to hit back on that. Because those are the kind of things where, if Pritzker is running a very kind of keep your head down, I just want to win, I got to get a majority of people, that's it. That's a very different kind of campaign than one that says, no, I need the 64th point, and the 64th point is what I'm going for here. Those are very different. So be ready.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. All right, let's shift. Go ahead, Chris. Final word.
No, the Democrats have nothing to lose here in this election. They know going into November that every second we spend at war with Iran is more points for them. The economy is doing terrible right now with the price of gas and the price of groceries. So the Democrats are basically playing with house money at this point for the governor's race. So I think it behooves Pritzker to actually try and run up the score at this point. And it would be incumbent on Bailey to actually bridge some type of contrast to make the people of Illinois, particularly in the suburbs, think that giving him their vote would actually benefit them somehow. And in relation to the money question, we have not seen that yet. So I would expect scorchers from the Democrats this November.
All right. All right, let's shift over to another race. We'll do these next ones a little faster, but we definitely have to spend some time on the U.S. Senate race. Let's start on the Republican side, much to Chris's chagrin, since he just loves talking about the Democratic side. Don Tracy, as we said, see, we weren't telling you a lie. We were telling you the truth all throughout the primary. He won 97 out of 102 counties, nearly doubled up his closest competitor. So Don Tracy will be the nominee. And he's already launched the general election contrast, running against Juliana Stratton. He's got a website up, extremestratton.com, pointing out that Juliana is too extreme for Illinois. Let's be real, guys. Stratton is the most progressive nominee that Illinois has ever seen for any position statewide. And she's got the record to prove it. As a matter of fact, I think that the challenge for us, all of us, is going to be identifying the key things to focus on, because if you just throw everything at her, it's going to be too much and voters won't remember it. But between answering for Pritzker's tax and spend agenda, her own economic agenda, her own economic plan that her fellow Democrats on stage laughed at her over, it's been called more extreme than even Bernie Sanders' plan. She's for eliminating private insurance. She wants government-run health care. She's backed by the Brandon Johnsons, Kim Foxes, Elizabeth Warrens, the CTUs of the world. Here's your best example. I said this on election night. We were doing all the research on Raja, and he had some vulnerabilities in a general election, and I was like, you know what? Actually, it wouldn't be too bad to run against. His economic plans, we ran the numbers, and it would be $7 trillion over the course of 10 years for his economic plan, despite the fact that he kept talking about how, the big, beautiful bill spent too much, which BBB was half that, but, whatever. But Stratton's economic plan's 30 trillion. Like, it's not even close. And just like we talked about with Pritzker possibly making mistakes, listen, this is Stratton's first statewide run. She's in a general election. She's not used to talking to general election voters who don't reside outside her, small CTU bubble. This is a situation where if they're smart, they're just going to put her in a closet for 6 months or 8 months, because she's highly likely to say some things that aren't going to play in a general election. But I don't see her going to the middle. That's not who Juliana Stratton is. So Don Tracy, who's more common sense, mainstream, against somebody who's super progressive. Can we win in a state like Illinois when 2026 looks like it's going to be rough for Republicans? I understand it's highly unlikely, but can Don Tracy overperform and help every other Republican throughout the state of Illinois? Heck yes, he can, and all of the factors are there for that to be possible.
Never a doubt, Colin. Never a doubt, Colin. The primary for U.S. Senate was always Don Tracy's to lose. He's ran a full campaign from the state fair until St. Patrick's Day. Jeannie Evans had late momentum. She did the bus tour with Darren and Aaron. She did. But if Jeannie wanted a chance to win this primary, she needed to do that a month ago. She needed to get out 2 months ago. She needed to actually become involved with the Republican Party in the state. Don's been involved in the Republican Party in the state for 2 decades. It was always going to be Don Tracy's race. I think the general election is going to be interesting because, like you said, Colin, Stratton is not some type of moderate Democrat, unifier for the party. She is a lock, stock, and barrel progressive, and she is not going to run away from those credentials. And frankly, I don't think the Democrats think she needs to.
Yeah, they're feeling real cocky.
So I think of all the races on the ballot, this is the one that's going to be the most interesting because I think Tracy presents the professional campaign that the state of Illinois Republican Party needs. And, obviously it includes me, it includes you, Colin. I get that. But this is the professional operation that the state of Illinois needs if they actually want a competent Republican Party. So
yeah, and listen, to be clear, you're not necessarily talking about us, though I think we're pretty great. But he's got a whole operation well beyond our company. He's got support. He's got local coordinators. He's got state level coordinators, regional coordinators, all well outside of what we bring to the table. So we're not talking about us, though it may sound like to some of you we are, but we're not. Don is also going to be at this point, the only funded candidate statewide. Bryan Drew is awesome. We'll talk about his race next, but he's not going to have the kind of funding, obviously, that Don Tracy's going to have. We've talked about Darren Bailey's funding problems. Actually, some of the people behind Bailey have already come, trying to say, oh, no, Don, we were with you the whole time. Could you cut us a check now? now? Because we need it on the Bailey side. It's like, yeah, okay. All the stuff you did with GD Evans, we're just going to forget about that overnight. Sure. So yeah, they're all looking at Don at this point to fund everything, which of course he's going to fund his race first. But the good news is what he's going to do for his race and for all of Republicans in Illinois will benefit every campaign, including Bailey and Drew and everybody else. So if you're part of the Republican Party at this point, you want to be celebrating and cheering for what Don can bring to this party because we need it. We don't have a lot of factors in our favor in November. This is one of the few.
I think that's a good point. And the only thing I'd add to that is, if we look at any individual race and say, well, this is the race that's responsible for being the sole shining light for Republicans in the state of Illinois, we're going to be disappointed. You've got to have multiple people pulling in the same direction. Every little bit's going to help. I made the point before about how so much of Illinois right now, when you win the primary and the general's already decided, we still need those folks to show up and vote, though. This has got to be something where even if you're in a place where, you're going to win 70-30 over a token Democratic opposition, you got to try to get some people out to the polls because everybody needs to be pulling in that direction. It's not just look to Don and hope he can pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Yep. Yep.
Well, and I think that's something that's like obviously the Tracy campaign is going to be doing this, but we need these local GOP organizations and precinct committeemen across the state to be doing the same thing, and that is drawing that contrast and making people aware of this is what Don Tracy stands for and this is what Juliana Stratton stands for. And you talk about that, in a barber shop, a beauty shop, a coffee shop in Hamilton County, Jefferson County, Franklin County. You can use that to drive more voters to the polls. That, look at Juliana's record. She's extreme. We can't have her in the United States Senate. You need to vote for Dawn. And we get those people out. We pick up 100 votes here, 250 votes there. That can make the difference in a state rep race. It can make a difference in a, state senate or a congressional. And that's what we have to do. Just run up the score in these counties, especially when there's things down ballot that are in play.
Yeah. There was I was so psyched when I saw that Juliana won. And I think, Chris, on the last podcast, you predicted that she was going to pull it off.
My chop liver, I've been predicting it too.
I've been predicting it for months since the beginning of the race.
So was I, Chris.
Was winning.
I was not. I give you guys credit. I was not. I thought it was going to be Raja. And I'll tell you, Raja is a snake, but he's charming. He's kind of likable. Robin Kelly, tons of political experience and, just battle scars. Juliana Stratton, I mean, yes, she's got unlimited money with JB behind her, but I think she's the least appealing of the three choices. I don't think she has that much of a personality. And frankly, the Pritzker travesty that exists here in Illinois, it could all be tied to her, even though it's not a governor's race. It's a Senate race. Carol Davis mentioned something at the Unity Breakfast about ballot harvesting. This was brought up by Michael Watley, too, in Chicago on Thursday. The fact that we are allowed to ballot harvest here and the fact that the Democrats are so good at it and we as Republicans aren't, because one, we don't really believe in it, but two, we don't have a lot of experience doing it. There's going to be a huge effort. Again, we have a lot more time than we did in 2022 to harvest ballots, to get churches to bring those mail-in voters ballots to the church on Sundays and say, hey, let's all fill them out at once and stick them in the mail right now. That, I think, is going to result in a heck of a lot more voters than voted on Tuesday, that's for sure, because the turnout for Republicans on Tuesday was abysmal. We have to, quadruple it if we're going to win one of these statewide races in November. And we know that can be done because we know that we have had over 2 million people vote in Republican elections that just happen to be in the presidential year. But I do think we can do it. I think we can win at least one, who knows, maybe 3 statewide elections this fall if we get our people to the polls.
I just only caveat, Mike, just because I got to say it is it's not. I know your point you're making. I'm just making sure our audience is aware. You don't just mean we got to go get all the hard R's to the polls. The point here is persuade and then lock in the vote, right? We got to get them with us and then lock it in. This idea that you're just going to get all the hard R's out and suddenly we magically win. That's
There's
not the
not
point.
enough.
That's not
There's
the point
not
you're
enough.
making. But some people out there, that's the point they're making, and I wanted to be sure we clarified that.
Absolutely.
You know, Chris, I know you're dying to talk about the race. So I'm going to just tick you off and talk about it first on the Dem side, which is just this. We talked about it last week. I've said it a few times over the months. I really want Republicans and conservatives and operatives and everyone who watches our podcast to learn the lesson here, which is Mike said it earlier. There's 3 phases to every campaign: awareness, persuasion, turnout. The problem is most Republicans only ever have to run awareness races. Raja has only ever really had to run awareness races. And if you look at all the stuff he put out, it was all about awareness. It was constantly about him and his name. And it was me, me, me. I saw this even the later ads. We're still just like all about Raja. Me, 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 and just call me Raja. And even his election night, his congratulatory message of Juliana, which wasn't really that, but whatever, was like, you know, a guy with 29 letters in his name or something. It was like everything about Raja was me, 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 me. He was running a perpetual awareness race. And by the time he reached the point where his name awareness had taken him as far as it could, that's when he stopped gaining. And for Republicans or operatives, you need to understand that once you have achieved the awareness phase of the campaign, you then need to shift into the persuasion phase of the campaign. It's not something many Republicans have ever had to do, but if you don't, you're going to do exactly what Raja just did. You're going to hit your ceiling, and you're never going to go from there. Meanwhile, Stratton and Pritzker and their team, they understand persuasion politics. They understand contrast politics, and that's why you saw them surge so effectively towards the end. It wouldn't have happened if Raja knew how to run a general election or a persuasion campaign. But the reality is he didn't, and Stratton's team took advantage, and kudos to them. But we need to learn this on our side of the aisle. This is why we harp on messaging. This is why we harp on the quality of your campaign operations. It doesn't really matter that much during the awareness phase. If you say your name to somebody, they get your name. If you put out a yard sign, they see your name. Awareness politics is very basic, very easy, an intern can do it. But when you get to the point of needing to run a persuasion campaign, which is a general election campaign that's well funded, now you got to know actually how to win. Raja didn't know that. He's not going to be a U.S. Senator as a result. You guys who are watching this, the whole point of this podcast is to help us grow. Please learn from Raja's failure because we got to learn that lesson so we do it better in the general. All right, Chris, I've filibustered enough. You can talk about the Dem side of the race for at least 35 seconds.
At least 35. I'll take my full 35. Thank you. You know, this, I got to give a lot of credit because it's clear that Stratton's campaign message resonated with a so much more diverse group of the electorate than Raja's did. It seems as though the only votes that Raja got were low information. I see the guy on TV a lot. That guy looks good to me. And Stratton's coalition was so much more broad. She got the black vote. She got progressive vote. She got the centrist vote. She got the Latino vote. She got white voters. Okay? Like, this is the most interesting aspect of the race because so many people coming into election day were presuming that Raja was going to be so strong in the suburbs and he was going to get all these white voters, all these working class voters, and that never materialized. Sure, he got small pluralities in certain areas. That's true. But it's the Stratton message and Stratton's infrastructural support, which came in for her at the very end with the township organizations, the elected officials. A lot of that stuff came in at the end. And that, I believe, combined with the poor race that Raja ran, where it was so narcissistic. It was a very narcissistic race ran by Raja, to where he always believed that this was his race. He can't lose it. He's going to spend $34 million. This is one of those examples where at some point you spend so much money, you're actually not doing yourself any favors anymore. At some point, the amount of times people are seeing you on TV isn't moving them. And I think Stratton realizes. I still think it was a poor move for Stratton to start the campaign late. But I do believe it did end up paying off for her in the end because Raja ended up exhausting all of his awareness in the first 3 months of the campaign. and then in the final 3 months where things actually matter, allowed Stratton to take up all the other voters who weren't interested in what Raja was selling. And one final point, too. I have been talking about Robin Kelly as the Manchurian candidate for a very long time. Colin's talked about it. Many people in the press have talked about it. And I think that Robin Kelly, if she was truly supposed to be the spoiler candidate, which at the end it seems she was, because she was getting like PAC money from Raja's people, right? Like they were funneling money into a PAC to support Kelly at the end. If she was supposed to be that, they did a terrible job doing it, because she started off strong. She was trying to bridge a gap to the left of both Raja and Stratton, to where she could get like progressive voters and Gaza activists, and that's where it seemed like she was lining it up. And then she kind of disappeared for 3 years. There was a time where Robin Kelly was actually ahead in a couple polls of Juliana Stratton. And ever since then, Robin Kelly's been nowhere. Stratton was everywhere. And I'm going to give credit to Stratton's team. Yes, you started too late. Yes, a lot of people talk crap about you early on in this race. But you know what? You guys did a great job putting Stratton over the top. And I'm thanking you, because it makes my life a little bit easier in the general election, because she's nuts. But at the same time, like this was a well done race. Congratulations to Stratton people. Well done.
Yeah, 2 lessons I think we can all take from that. One, no campaign has ever run perfectly. You can make mistakes, and your opponent can make even bigger mistakes. I mean, had Raja had a plan for how he was going to contrast the race and get into persuasion and steal the deal, then Juliana starting too late would have been a fatal error. But the good news for her team was Raja didn't take advantage. He peaked too early, and the Stratton team was able to peak just in the nick of time. So, yeah, kudos to them on that. They were able to take advantage of their opponent's mistake, and their mistakes didn't end up costing them.
Had this been a traditional race in which Juliana was out there looking for donors and trying to, stay within the federal caps and, getting a couple $1,000 here and there, maybe the Raja approach of being like, hey, look, I'm out there early. Every poll I'm winning by double digits in. She's in third in some of these polls. It could have caused her donors to dry up. But when you have one donor who's going to gift you no matter what, that strategy doesn't work. She's got a fundraising audience of 1.
Yeah, well, listen, and I think there were how many weeks in a row that we said Raja has peaked, he hasn't moved? I mean, that's the biggest failure of them, is sticking to the same strategy that wasn't working. One of my favorite quotes is by Eisenhower. He said, "No plan survives contact with the enemy." Any of my clients know I don't work on a race that I don't have a plan on paper, but you also have to understand that you cannot be belligerent. This plan we wrote a year ago might not be valid right now. It might not be working. We have to be able to adjust on the fly while still using that as our foundation. They didn't do that. They stayed, they were, we're going to stick with what we're doing. What they were doing wasn't working. I think the last I said I was going to make 2 points. The second one I was going to make is everyone's talking about how, don't doubt Pritzker. Pritzker always wins. All of his candidates won. He owns the state. And I just want to make one clarifying point. First, yes, I'll give kudos. Pritzker's team won, so I'm not going to deny that. But let's clarify what Pritzker owns here. Pritzker owns the Democratic Party. And more accurately, Pritzker owned those Democrats who showed up in this election. Remember, we talked about the fact that only 22% of voters turned out. So Pritzker owns the portion of the 22% that were Democrats. What is that? 70% of that, so that's 15%. So Pritzker owns 15% of the voters in the state. Why am I being, nitpicking at the data? The reason is, let's stop pretending like Pritzker just owns Illinois, and when Pritzker gets involved, he gets whatever he wants, he wins everything. That's not the reality. Yeah, his billions are buying him lots of stuff, and yes, he does own the Democratic Party today, but this idea that he owns the electorate is absolutely not true. He owns the Democrats who showed up as part of that 22% of the voters who showed up. I mean, 78% of the voters who didn't show up, Pritzker does not own those voters. So stop thinking like just because Pritzker wants it, it's going to happen. He is absolutely vulnerable in this next election, just based on the fact that there's so many voters who weren't showing up to this race, and based on the fact that I've looked at data and poll after poll after poll that shows that despite Pritzker's dominance, his favorability is still just break even. And the right direction rung track for Illinois is still underwater. So it's not as if voters think Pritzker walks on water. Democratic voters, primary voters, yeah, at this point, probably, but let's not say all voters. All right, let's go to the other statewide. We're going to focus on the comptroller race. No disrespect to any other Republicans who did run. You guys can certainly bring them up if you'd like. But the reality is the comptroller's race is an open seat. And so as a result, it's our best chance of the remaining 4 statewides that are on the ballot, other than the 3 races we've talked about, Gov, Light, Gov, and Senate. So let's talk about the comptroller's race. As of the time of this recording, the race has not been called for Democrats, but it's pretty widely understood that Margaret Croke is going to be the nominee. Karina Villa did significantly overperform, so we'll give her credit for that. But Croke is highly, highly likely to be the nominee on the Democratic side. Bryan Drew was unopposed on the Republican side, so we have our general election matchup between Croke and Drew. The Drews, even though they didn't have a primary, worked their butts off. They were everywhere. I can't tell you the number of times I saw Mike Coolidge or somebody post a photo from an event they were at, and there's Bryan and Kristen in the background at that event. Like, they worked their butts off. So kudos to them in a primary where they could have just put their feet up and said, we'll wait till the general election starts. Well, general election is starting now, and you've got a pretty good contrast here between Margaret Croke, who is owned by J.B. Pritzker. He created her. She has paid her fealty publicly on numerous occasions. She will be a rubber stamp for J.B. Pritzker and her colleagues in Springfield when it comes to the comptroller's office, in the one office that every voter agrees needs to be independent. So that leaves a wide open lane for somebody like Bryan Drew to say, I'm going to be the check and balance. I'm going to be truly independent. This is another race that Republicans have an opportunity to overperform.
Collin, you're spot on about Bryan Drew, and I'll tell you, I've been following and involved in politics for a very long time in this state, and I don't know that I've ever seen somebody completely come out of the blue, come out of the woodwork, and be so solid, so hardworking, and so immediately just on point. And he's running for comptroller. One of the most boring offices, compared with the rest of them in the state. But he did not need to go to every county in the state. He did not need to take his lovely wife, who's doing, I know, a ton of the behind the scenes work on him. His social media is just through the roof. He is. If there's going to be a sleeper in the statewide races this year, again, I hope we get two, and a third would be fantastic. It's going to be this comptroller's race, and he's just getting started, Bryan Drew.
Michael, I know you're proud. Come on, man, jump in.
I mean, the thing that really surprised me on the Democratic side was that Holly Kim wasn't in second. I mean, she got third place. Like, the Susana Mendoza thing was weird. Like, why did they wait so long to roll that out when it was blatantly obvious that was what that was who Mendoza was supporting? But I don't know if it was, I guess maybe Bernie Sanders had a little bit of an impact. Maybe it was because, Karina Villa, Hispanic, like, probably got some votes because of that. But it really surprised me that she got second, considering, how lackluster of a campaign she seemed to run.
And I think people are missing this with this whole Pritzker owns the Democratic Party narrative, which I just parroted a few minutes ago, so I'll be clear. But it's not as if it's a complete domination, because I know a number of progressive organizations who are pushing Stratton, and they're pushing Villa, not Croke. So this idea that it was just all J.B. Pritzker, there were a number of progressive organizations who have workers, they have people out there, they have reach, who were pushing Villa and Stratton here. So Stratton's surge certainly helped Villa, I think, in that regards. But I think I look at Croke's results and say, you know what, there are limits to Pritzker's power, even in the Democratic Party. He barely got Croke over the finish line, when frankly the rest of the candidates didn't have much money and didn't do much. So I think there are, if I'm on the Democratic side of the aisle, which I'm not, but I'm looking at that saying, it isn't like as if this is, Supreme Chancellor Pritzker here on the Democratic side. There are certainly other factors at play in the Democratic primaries and the Democratic Party.
I think one interesting thing too here is that the primary attack levied against Croke during the primary is also one that's playable in the general. So sometimes in a primary, you've got, she's not progressive enough, or some of these arguments that you're just not going to be able to make as a Republican candidate against her in the general. This attack of being insufficiently independent, or not an actual check and balance against Pritzker, that was one that, they were sensitive to in the primary. They had to respond to in the primary. She had to try to demonstrate she was going to be independent. That plays very well in a general election argument as well. And so I think it is kind of nice that, she comes out of there with a weakness that's exploitable both before and after that Democratic primary is over.
Yeah, I mean, Kim would have been a little bit tougher in the general. Kifowit would have been a lot tougher, not voting for the budgets, her union support. Neither of them really caught fire too much. But yeah, I mean, Croke has voted for all these budgets that now suddenly she's supposed to oversee. Obviously, Mendoza even hinted that wasn't necessarily the best setup. So I don't know that Susanna's going to get involved with this race against Team Pritzker when she wants to be Chicago's mayor. But when even the sitting comptroller is like, yeah, I don't know if this is the best option, that tells you something.
Well, the audio's still there, the clips are still there, the internet's forever, right? So take those and broadcast it.
Yep. All right, let me take us to the next races. We'll bunch these rest ones because obviously we've already been on air here for almost an hour. Let's talk about the congressional races. There were a few challenge primaries here that got a good amount of attention. You had Dillan Vancil, who won the Illinois 17th primary against Julie Bickelhaupt. It was a solid race. I think if you look at the final results, hopefully Julie sticks around. She showed a lot of promise. Niki Conforti won her primary in aisle 6. We've talked about some of the problems with her primary opponent, but Niki won overwhelmingly. And then you have aisle 8, Jennifer Davis won her primary pretty handily. Jim Marter won the 14th by a solid margin. And then Jeff Walter in aisle 11 pulled his off. There's others, of course. I know 13 was Jeff Wilson, I think.
Jeff Wilson.
Jeff and Jeff. There were others, but those are the 5 I know that we're looking at the most because they're the closest to being in play. Obviously, Niki and Dillan were both guests on our podcast, so congratulations to them, and we're glad they came on. Some interesting races here. If you look to the general, 17 by the numbers is the most in play. Dillan's a working class guy, down to earth. If he plays up that sort of working man image compared to Sorensen, who's way too far left for that district, maybe there could be a run there. Niki Conforti is in a rematch against Sean Casten, who was always left, but he continues to find new ways to go further left. Jennifer Davis in the 8th, that's an open seat against Melissa Bean. That's going to be real interesting. Our buddy John Lopez has a great piece in the McHenry County blog. You should check it out, talking about how you essentially have 2 centrists and 2 females in a race, which is super interesting. I have PTSD on Melissa Bean. I'm just amazed that progressives didn't believe in Junaid Ahmed and didn't get behind him because he clearly came close enough. He could have won that primary. I think they're all kicking themselves on that one. Marter in 14 is a rematch. I don't expect that to be a big race, but maybe Jim can surprise us. And 11 is, one of those you hope for, but the numbers so far aren't looking great, but we'll see. But those are the congressionals. Anyone have quick thoughts on any of those races?
I mean, I think, Vancil got out so early and was working it hard from day one. Bickelhaupt was kind of a late entry, so I think that, wasn't surprising to a lot of people that Vancil pulled that one off. I think Conforti and Davis, I mean, their opponents were just, beyond the pale. A lot of inappropriate things said and done by those campaigns. So I'm glad that they pulled those off because I think, they're going to be good representatives of the Republican brand in those congressional districts in November, win or lose. And I think that's going to be a big help to some of those down ballot races, especially some of the state Senate and state rep. Because there's a lot of overlap there where, we have to keep those seats or, we have to, or, in some cases, maybe we have a chance to flip a seat in those regions with some of the, retirements from House Dems or House Dems that ran for Congress and lost the primary and now their seats open. So I think, overall, the right people won in these races.
I think the most interesting of these is the 6th with Niki Conforti. It was the closest race in 2024. Everyone kind of forgets that. Everyone likes to talk about aisle 17. No, it's my district. It's aisle 6. And the thing about Niki that I think is most interesting is that she's getting a lot of support from the Arab American community because Sean Casten is not a fan of theirs, and they don't like Casten back. So Niki has pledged not to take money from foreign interests, and that's getting a lot of support from the Arab American community. And I do think if, the most Palestinian district in the entire United States, if they get behind Niki Conforti, you could see that become a race.
My point, I think, is that we have the opportunity because of some unpopular Democratic politicians at the national level to tie Democrats who are running for Congress in Illinois to the furthest left positions that many of them are taking. And even with Juliana Stratton running as a far left candidate for U.S. Senate here, are they going to be on the same stage with her? Are they going to endorse the most progressive, farthest left ideas that she has? It gives us an opportunity to come in and say, they might be presenting themselves as a more moderate candidate, but really they're standing in league with people who are advocating some of these very far left policy decisions.
Yeah. All right, let me take us to some of our legislative races. First, we'll talk about the Republicans who were being primaried. It fell just basically how we were presenting it over the course of the many episodes we've covered these races. In House District 94, Josh Higgins won, beating the incumbent Norine Hammond. Meanwhile, the incumbents won in House Districts 109, 89, and 116. That's Charlie Meyer, Tony McCombie, Dave Severin. As we said, this is kind of how we said it was playing out, that it really was House District 94. That was really the only of those races that are in play. Let me be clear. I think I said this in our internal Discord. I think every single individual or group on the conservative side is claiming, they're claiming victory in House District 94, saying, A, they're the reason why Josh Higgins won, and or B, this is proof that blank, and blank is, their pet issue. The reality is, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't live there. I'm not involved. I don't know Norine. I've talked to her twice on these podcasts. So I'm just telling you what I heard over and over from people who lived in the district. It's that this was a product of local Republicans being frustrated, that when you had county GOP leaders in her district who were lining up to potentially run against her, there were as many as 6 or 7 different people who were jockeying to be the candidate against Norine before the race even began. This was not I know the Freedom Caucus got involved. Tom DeVore got involved. So I'm sure they can take some level of credit here. And Higgins did thank them. And that's appropriate. But the reality is this race was much bigger than any of those groups, any of those pet issues. This really just speaks to, the Eric Cantor lesson and others that you got to keep working your district. You got to keep those relationships strong, because otherwise you could find yourself in a primary. You could find yourself on the wrong side of the primary. This isn't to attack Norine again. I don't know her. I just know what I heard locally, and that was that this thing was building up from the bottom up. This was not some of these groups parachuting in and doing some events that were poorly attended, and suddenly that was the reason why Josh Higgins won. So I think the lesson to be taken here is, stay in line with your district, work your district, build those local relationships, even if you're a long-term incumbent. Otherwise, something like this could happen to you.
And I don't think that Josh Higgins is like the typical archetype of a Tom DeVore candidate. Tom DeVore candidates are usually people picked out of a crowd and say, you want to run against this guy? He's a rhino. Okay. That's not what Josh Higgins was. Josh Higgins was on this podcast. I think he did a decent job. I think he's a decent public speaker. Seems like he worked the district pretty hard. And like you said, Colin, there seemed to be something going on in the district that was outside of the realm of Republican Party squabbles that relate to Tom DeVore and Facebook. This wasn't one of those races, okay?
Some of those were created by votes she made. So this is not us apologizing for her voting history. Some of this was created by her votes, just to be clear. But even when you make those votes, you go home and you build relationships around it. You say, listen, we weren't on board with each other on that one vote, but I'm still with you. Like, there's ways to vote against certain constituencies and still not have them want to take you out. And it doesn't appear that happened. Sorry, Chris.
No, you're good. This was an actual campaign. That's something that, again, Tom DeVore and the Bailey crew rarely do, is run actual campaigns.
But they didn't run this one.
Yeah, they didn't run this one. Josh Higgins raised a little bit of money, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. Sometimes incumbents lose. This is one of those scenarios. I think if you're the House Republicans, it sucks. I don't think Norine's a bad representative. But at the same time, like I think you said it, Colin, you can vote whatever way, within reason. You can vote whatever way you want within reason. But you got to play the game. You got to build up your own political organization. You got to build up your own group of supporters and volunteers and donors. You have to do that yourself, and you cannot always rely on, the House Republicans and the money and the mail and the negative campaign ads. No, you are an elected official. And as an elected official, I'm not talking about Norine. I'm talking to you, the listener. I'm talking to everybody who's a candidate watching this podcast. It is incumbent on you to build up your political network, build up your own base of volunteers, because if you rely on other people, meaning like other outside groups and organizations, be they the Koch brothers or the House Republicans, if you only rely on those people to get you over the finish line, you will be sorely disappointed when it comes to election.
And there are too many incumbents who don't work their districts, don't build those relationships, don't communicate out to the voters regularly because they're safe or they've never had to. And it only works until suddenly you're not safe, whether you're redrawn in a remap, which is coming up again soon, or you get primaried. This is just a sort of a reminder and a wake-up call to incumbents that you got to be working your district, whether you think you're safe or you're not.
Well, and I think that's why, you look at like Dave Severin and Charlie Meyer. I mean, you go if you're in their district, they're there. I mean, you see them at pancake breakfast and chicken dinners, and they're working the crowds, they're talking to people, they're answering questions or explaining votes when people ask. And I like Charlie Meyer. I mean, he got 74% of the vote in St. Clair County, 71% in Madison County, 69% in Washington County. When you're putting up those kind of numbers in these counties, you're safeguarded from a challenge like he faced,
I think
and he won.
What some of these people, like, they were making fun of Charlie. They called it, was it Chicken Dinner Charlie?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but that actually I would take as a point of pride. That means I show up at all the events in my district, and that's what you're making fun of me for? That's actual grassroots politics, not just posting on Facebook and, getting lots of people to like it so I can make some money, but like actually talking to voters. Gee, that's kind of how you win elections.
That's a great point. I mean, I think that Chicken Dinner Charlie, that is perfectly, Charlie is one of the most approachable guys. He can have a conversation with absolutely anybody. People feel comfortable talking to him about things. I mean, that's an attribute for somebody in elected office, that you're out at a normal, average kind of event and you're not just sticking in some political bubble.
Yep. Well, Josh Higgins has said he's going to join the Freedom Caucus, so we'll certainly have to keep an eye on not only how our Republican politics in the House, how does that play out through November, but then when Higgins is sworn in, since that's a red district, he's going to be the elected official after November. What does that look like? It's one more vote. He's already said he wants to see a new House Republican leader. So that's going to be one fewer vote for McCombie when it comes time to leadership. So that's going to be a dynamic that obviously everyone's going to have to watch between now and January. Speaking of deep red districts where the nominees are going to be the elected officials, let's just quickly do our diligence here and point out that in Senate District 59, Paul Jacobs won handily over his opponent. And then Scott Duty won solidly, 16, looking at 16 points. There we go, in his race. So those both, again, ruby red districts, well, decently red districts. I was corrected recently. But ultimately, both of those will be the elected officials after November. So congratulations to them. Michael, it's your region. So any quick thoughts on those races?
Yeah, I mean, the only one that really matters here out of the two is the Scott Duty one. That was a loss for the Freedom Caucus. Joe DuBose was running. He dropped out. They threw their support behind Visser. I think they gave him, around 12 grand and the final weeks of that campaign. And it was a three-way race, and it ended up being a three-way race because of the DuBose dropping out. And Scott Duty got 51% of the vote in a three-way race. So I think that was, a repudiation of the Freedom Caucus in that district, that, their support, their financial support, their, social media support did not move the numbers.
Michael, listen, I hate when you guys put me in a position to defend the Freedom Caucus, but I always try to be fair here. If Scott Duty stayed in, he would have probably, or Scott Duty, if Joe DuBose stayed in, he probably would have won. And then would you be saying the same thing? Because I'm sure DuBose would be a Freedom Caucus member. I mean, I think that's a function of their candidate dropped out late and they scrambled. Again, I'm not looking to defend anybody, but I do want our podcast to be fair.
Sure.
All right, let me take us to last group of races here, and then we will get to our final topic before closing down. There's some random districts here where, in some cases, the Springfield Republicans got their preferred candidates. In one case, they did not. Senate District 36, that's where Republicans are hoping to make a play against Mike Halpin, the incumbent. It's the number 2 potential pickup for Senate Republicans outside of Lesko in the Springfield area. Brad Beekman was the Republican preferred candidate, I think is how they worded it, and he won that primary. It's pretty close, 53-47 last time I checked, but super close race. We had both him and his primary opponent, Patrick Harlan, on our podcast. Appreciate both of them coming on. Appreciate both of them running. Beekman does have a little bit more of a general election profile there, so I know Republicans are feeling like they're well positioned if they have a chance to play on offense. House District 76, same deal. Republicans in Springfield wanted Liz Bishop again, but she first had to get through a rematch in her primary before she could have a rematch in her general. Looks like she's pulled off the primary 60-40, so she's going to be facing Amy Murray Briel in the general election. House Republicans are looking at that as one of their top potential pickup opportunities on that side. So good news for Republicans there. Also good news for Republicans in House District 52. Maria Peterson pulled it off pretty handily in that race in that primary. She's been around forever, and she rode that to victory. She will be a little bit easier for Marty McLaughlin to beat in the general. Still is going to be a super, super, super tough race. But again, good news for Republicans in that race. The only race where it's the opposite, where Republicans didn't get who they wanted, at least Springfield Republicans and the incumbent, Don DeWitt and Springfield Republicans wanted Jessica Brueggelmans in Senate District 33, but Danielle Penman pulled it off. Wasn't particularly close, 59-41. I know some people in looking at that race, Penman was backed by some of the really conservative, people who call themselves grassroots, but just, spend all day on Facebook crowd. And even in her issues and how she presented herself went pretty far right to win that primary. Senate Republicans and Brueggelmans were trying to position themselves for the general so they could hold on to Senate District 33. And it was a risk they were willing to take. Unfortunately, it was a risk that means they're not getting the candidate that they wanted in that race. So now it's going to be on Penman to try to hold on to Senate District 33. That's going to be one of the toughest holds for the Republicans, the Senate Republicans. So certainly going to need to keep an eye on that district. Any thoughts on those 4 random races?
I can talk about 76. Liz Bishop, like you said, exact rematch from last time. And if you remember, one of the only sort of moderate Democrats, Lance Yednock, that's the district that he represented prior. This Burial or this Marie Burial character is a far, far leftist, Amy Marie Briel. And she can be defeated. And Liz Bishop lost by less than 1% in the general election as a first-time candidate. She's no longer a first-time candidate. It's the exact same map, and she's been campaigning like heck. And I have a lot of optimism for that seat to flip from D to R in November.
Nice.
I think the interesting thing about Senate District 33 is that while Penman was supported by some of the more grassroots types in the Republican Party, she also had support amongst organized labor.
It's true.
So I think that kind of balances out any type of, sure, she's backed by grassroots and might have said some more conservative things in primary, but also she has the backing of, probably one of the most powerful lobbies in the entire state. And from a moderate
but Chris, here's my only question is, are they going to be with her in the general, or are they going to go shift over to Michelle Clark? That's what I ask. If they stay with Penman, then maybe we got a shot there. But if they shift over to the Democrat, to Michelle Clark in the general, that makes it real hard to hold on to 33.
I would agree with that.
Because it was an interesting coalition of people who were behind Penman. You're certainly right about that one. All right, let's go to our last topic for everyone to weigh in on. I only have one example here because I only frankly need one, but here's the one thing that Tom has already said. So if you want to know Tom's thoughts on this topic, you have to watch the whole episode because he said it earlier, and I'm not going to tell you where, so you got to watch the whole thing. But the reality is, as we go into the general, Chris has said this, I've said this, a lot of people on this podcast have said it. Democrats are feeling real confident for November. Now, let me be fair. There's a reason why they feel confident, and the numbers do bear out that they should feel confident. But they are way beyond confident. They are at cocky, which may end up working out in their favor, or maybe it doesn't, because you're not going to see any of these Democrats pivot to the middle. Usually you see in politics, you run for your base in the primary, then you run for the middle in the general. Illinois Democrats don't tend to do that, and I would imagine this election, they're even less likely to do that. And so ultimately that may create an opportunity, but 2 things have to happen. 1, Republicans have to take advantage, and 2, Republicans actually have to do what Democrats aren't doing. Republicans actually have to do. Wow. was making a great point till that moment. Republicans really do have to talk to voters in the middle. If Democrats are unwilling to do it because they think, whatever, we got this in the bag, Republicans have got to take advantage of that opportunity to go talk to those swing voters, those independents, those moderate voters, the people who are not going to react well to a far left progressive message from the Democrats. This is our chance to go win those people and start picking up some votes and making up ground. It's an open topic here, but I think, A, do you think Republicans might get an opening on this? B, do you think Republicans are actually going to take advantage of it and go speak to some moderate voters for once? What do you guys think?
I think that Republicans need to absolutely speak to moderates and absolutely speak to independents, but make the arguments, persuade. The Democrats, you're totally right, are not going to moderate. And the leftist positions are so unpopular nationally, and they get so cocky, the left, because they're in a bubble. They don't listen to half the country, over half the country. So I think Republicans can win in November if they stick to their principles, get their voters out, and persuade those in the middle that they're not the crazies, the lefties are, and we can win.
I think it's a great point to say, listen to voters. There's this window right now. The primary is just completed. We have a ways to go before the general. This is the point where you need to be putting your finger on the pulse of what voters are talking about today, trying to find, not just an issue where there's a contrast between Republicans and Democrats, but maybe there's an issue that Democrats are just they're ignoring, they're not talking about, they're not listening to voters on. Sometimes it's your voice against the deafening silence from the other side that can be a strongest contrast of all. So find out what's the issue that's being underreported today that voters want people to talk about, but they're not. Maybe that's an opportunity to get in there instead of just rehashing the same well-drawn battle lines from previous cycles.
Voters will glaze over if you just say the same things you've always said in the same way you've always said them, which is Republicans' problem. It's always the same taxes message that we've been using for decades, and voters, it's correct. We do need to improve affordability in this state. We need to lower taxes in this state. It's the right message. I get it. But voters, if we haven't learned anything from the primary, it's that, campaigns there's marketing to it, there's advertising to it, there's messaging to it. And if voters tune you out because they've heard the same message over and over, then you're not going to get their votes. All right, let me take us to our last couple segments then. We'll talk about our news you can use. I get a little cigar in my mouth. I thought that in an election week, we'd have much less news you can use, but actually we didn't. This first one, in a normal episode, you may not expect that this would be my first news you can use. And maybe those who saw this agenda beforehand might have chuckled at it. But I got to tell you, I was so angry over this. We almost did a special SFR. Michael, Chris, my wife saved you because I wanted to do a special SFR just on this. And I know it's going to sound crazy, but just bear with me. The old Joliet haunted prison is no more. Okay, and here's why. Because the prison and the paperwork that requires state approval, they have a new agreement. And that new agreement, unfortunately, this entertainment group is no longer an approved use with this new agreement with the state. So as a result, the Joliet Correctional Center could not renew that lease, and there won't be a haunted prison or a haunted house in the Joliet prison. This may seem like a dumb thing that I wanted to do an episode on all by itself, but here, Illinois has so many things, so many challenges, so many struggles. We have so many big issues. This is such a small thing. It's a paperwork snafu. Could we please have a governor who cares enough about Illinois to pick up the damn phone to say, this is stupid, guys. Send me the paperwork. I'll fix it. Let's get that. Everybody knows the haunted prison at Old Joliet. It brings people into the region. It's exciting. It's interesting. It's not boring because let's be real. Sometimes life can get kind of boring in the suburbs. Like, this is a thing that celebrates Illinois, and we don't even have this anymore because of what? A paperwork problem? Like, this is what drives me crazy about Illinois. Yeah, we've got big problems, but this used to be the state that works. Now we can't even file paperwork properly or make sure we do things in such a way that something this popular amongst your citizens and even tourists could continue. Something that doesn't really cost the state anything, and yet it's bringing in revenue and excitement to the local economy. I know I'm getting worked up about something small, but this is why Illinois is struggling. We don't even do the small, obvious things right, and it just drives me crazy. Am I alone? Am I making too big of a deal out of this? Chris, it's your region. Like, shouldn't we have kept this going?
Sure. And part of government is building relationships with serious stakeholders and serious businesses and saying when something like this happens, listen, Joliet Prison, old Joliet Prison, it's a financial boon for the region. We're going to take care of this. Whatever they got to do, let's get it done. No, it's not necessarily paying favoritism, but it's understanding when something has such serious, effects on an area and effects on the state's economy that you can say, like, yeah, let's take care of these guys. It's about being compassionate, okay? And that doesn't just extend to big companies like this. It can extend to the small companies as well. The ones who need that type of help from their government. And government's not there to hurt the people. It's there to help the people at the end of the day.
It's supposed to be, but in Illinois that doesn't happen. And Chris, this is what we've been saying for a while, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Tom, but like this is what we've been saying, that if you're a big corporation outside of Illinois that wants help, Pritzker's there to give you a big tax break. But like we just need a paperwork thing fixed, and state government just doesn't give a crap. Like this is why small businesses in Illinois are so frustrated, because they can't get help. But you want to open up a new battery operation from China. Okay, great. We'll be there for you. You want to open up a car manufacturer, which we need. I get it. But like everyday businesses, small to mid-sized manufacturers and businesses, they get nothing from Illinois. So it drives me crazy.
Well, and I think this is a perfect example of like a local issue that if you're running for state rep or state senate in this area, like you need to be talking about it. Like if I was your state rep, I would be fighting for this to open back up. This is what our community needs. On and on and on. Just rail them for it.
Yeah, there's so few Democrats are small business owners or come from that world where they had to sign the front of a paycheck and deal with regulations and deal with taxes. I mean, I just read, what was it, recently, that we have the highest, or Chicago has the highest hotel taxes in the state now. How is that for attracting businesses and stuff here? But this 13th floor thing with the haunted Joliet, my wife is a gigantic haunted house fan, as am I. We try to do them every single year. And yeah, just, there, again, are so few people who have the, Chris, you mentioned compassion, but it's even just like the common sense, the pro-business. Wait a second. We're in elected office here. We need to get things and make things easy for our constituents, including our business owners. This is a no-brainer, but it's just that instinct is not there for so many, yes, Democrats.
Well, it's like what we talked about last week when CBS had the story about the young mothers who had their babies ripped away from them because of a paperwork snafu with DCFS. Like, these are the things that just should never happen.
Yeah.
All right. I'll move us on. All right. Next one. Illinois has the highest gas prices in the Midwest. This map that you're seeing on screen, if you're watching this on YouTube, is from a week ago. I'm sure it continues to today because Illinois usually has the highest gas prices in the Midwest, 10th highest in the country. And look, if you look at that map, look at California. Obviously, they're the highest in the country. But what I always love, sarcastically, is how many times I see bills put forward by far left politicians down in Springfield that say, California does this and we should copy paste. California does this. It's like, you see how much they're paying for their gas, highest in the country by far. Maybe that's not the state we should be emulating in our policies. Just a thought. We're already the highest in the Midwest. Going to the next one, Michael mentioned it. He's correct. Chicago's hotel tax is now the highest in the nation. And let me be clear, from a policy perspective, the hotel owners and the Illinois Hotel and Lodging Association want this new additional 1.5% tax. It's essentially going to be a version of a TIF so they can reinvest. So I get that they want that, and that's fine. We're not talking policy on this podcast. It's a political podcast. And so if you continue to try to contrast yourself with the other side, this is now yet another tax in Illinois that's going to be the number one in the country. And Democrats are in control. It's happened under their watch.
I'd add on this one too, that Chicago is such a magnet for tourism from across the country and around the world. We need to think about tourists are paying the highest hotel tax. Then they're buying a ticket to something. They got the amusement tax on there. They're going shopping. They've got the highest sales taxes on there. I mean, it's really, if we were just an outlier in one area, maybe that'd be one thing. But man, across the board, we're just soaking every penny possible out of residents and tourists alike. That can't last forever.
No, it's interesting you say that because you mentioned residents and tourists, and you're correct. Let's talk about the residents. Because of that unaffordability problem in Chicago and all of Illinois, but especially in Chicago, the average Chicago homeowner's age, Crane Chicago has reported on this, is now 56.5 years old. It's, I think, 4 years old. Let's see, it was 54 back in 2010. So it's continued to climb. This is a little bit what Chris keeps saying, that it's unaffordable for young people to even be able to buy homes. It's also unaffordable for existing homeowners to be able to move out of their homes because they can't afford the new home, especially when they're locked into a low interest rate right now. And so you've got an affordability problem in Chicago, but you look at a city like Chicago that thrives on the entrepreneurial spirit, on businesses growing and thriving, on young people bringing energy and excitement to a city. The fact that the average homeowner is 56 and a half years old in Chicago, these are the reasons why people like me look at this and say, is this the right place to raise my kid? Am I doing the wrong thing by my little boy Teddy, keeping him in a place where it's clear there may not be future opportunities? And this is yet another one of those metrics where you're like, man, the future does not look bright if these are the metrics we're looking at. Speaking of Chicago, let's stick on Chicago for our next one. People who continue to tell us that crime just isn't a problem and we should stop talking about crime because nobody cares about it. The reality is there are still plenty of situations where we should be talking about crime. And one of those is domestic violence. Domestic violence homicides in Chicago are up 15%. There continue to be a problem all throughout this state. I know the new Cook County State's Attorney is making this a big focus on her end, raising detention rates and fighting this. But 1 in 4 violent crimes in Chicago is domestic violence. Not a lot of focus is put on this. Not enough focus is putting on this. I've been proud to work with organizations like Wings over the years. We need to put way more focus on this because, yes, crime may be down in some categories, but domestic violence is not a situation where we want that crime to be anywhere near as high as it is. This is a problem that we need to do something about. Moving to the next one. So let's start talking about some bad bills. First, we'll start with Senate Bill 3838. This bill, the Center Square did a whole write-up about this. It's about the federal broadband grants and the state's push to install that and take advantage of that. But the reality is, if you read the bill, what's essentially happening here is they're saying it's taking too long to actually negotiate with homeowners so we can go on their property and dig up their property. What we'd rather have instead is a notification system where we can just tell them, hey, in 14 days, we're going to be there digging up your property. Not asking permission, not coming up to an agreement, just, hey, your private property, we're going to come dig it up in 2 weeks. That's what Senate Bill 3838 is. And we're seeing this more and more down in Springfield. You know, the very people who want no kings very much want to have such dictatorial control over local zoning, over our municipalities, and now even over our own properties to let them come on and just do what they want when they want. This is a pretty common thing we're seeing right now in Springfield. And for anybody who would like to see individual rights respected, it's concerning.
Yeah, it's what's the word I could think of? A soft form of tyranny, where the government just decides, yeah, we rule over you, and we're going to tell you when we're going to do something. It's ridiculous. Again, the instinct of a leftist Democrat.
Yeah, Chris Davis from the Illinois Farm Bureau has done a good job raising awareness on that, so kudos to them. Moving to the next one, Senate Bill 4168. This is the next target for Democrats and where they want to raise taxes in the prediction market. And listen, I don't really care whether you like or dislike gambling or prediction markets and you think prediction is or isn't gambling. The reality is this: Democrats continue to say that they're going to lower your cost of living. They're going to fix the affordability crisis. But what do they do when they get down to Springfield? They just look for more and more ways to raise revenue and raise your costs, raise your fees. So now they want a $1 million license from anybody who works in this space, any of the prediction markets, that has to be renewed every few years. Then they also want 50% of all of their adjusted gross receipts. I mean, this is kind of how they treat casinos, but at least within with the casinos, they start at 15% and then move up to 50. This is literally 50 of all of their adjusted gross revenues. This is a huge hit in that space. And again, it's just cash grabs from Springfield. Any way they see a place they can go to get more money, whether it's from businesses or hardworking families, they're going to jump right on it.
Look, I'll say this, Collin. As a rambling, gambling man myself at times, perhaps it's hypocritical of me to say such a thing, but I mean, we're reaching a point in American society where the gambling markets is getting out of control. Whatever happened to the small town bookie, I ask you? We're just going in the wrong direction as a country, I think.
Sounds like Chris is upset that nobody's coming to him as their bookie anymore.
Listen, no, we know you don't need to know nothing about that. But I think that
The VIG.
regulation and taxation of these prediction markets and these gambling markets, because of the way where we're at as a society with gambling, isn't the worst idea. And I think, to make a political point, I think if you're trying to make the argument in terms of working families being hurt by governmental regulation and tax increases, I don't think using the gaming industry is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, not saying for people to feature this in their campaigns, but again, over and over and over and over, we're told that Pritzker and the Democrats are making our lives more affordable. His TV ad just said it. We're lowering your costs. And then that's not actually what we see in Springfield. They find their ways, and yeah, you're right, Chris. This is a sin tax. I get it. But they continue to find any way they can to extract money out of us. Even if it is in the sin tax space, it's still taking money from your residents. All right, last one here, Senate Bill 3794. I've mentioned previously, and I'll continue to mention it, that municipalities are livid at Springfield and J.B. Pritzker. They've been blowing up my phone for weeks now, and here we go, yet another example. Here we've got a bill by Springfield Democrats that, yet again, they're going to try to overrule municipalities and stop them from having their own zoning. They may not adopt or enforce an ordinance, rule, or other measure that would regulate the installation or inspection of a residential energy backup system, or including on a building with a shared roof. This is, again, another situation where Springfield's saying, you know what, you local municipalities, we don't agree with how you're doing everything, so we're going to run everything from Springfield. And it just keeps happening over and over on different things, whether it's housing and zoning, whether it's energy and where that's put, now it's batteries. We just keep seeing this, and municipalities are not happy. The one area of government in Illinois that's still working is your local governments. And Springfield, which isn't working, is coming in saying, nah, we're going to run it instead.
Again, 90% of them, too, people who've never actually run a business that
or run a municipality, been a
or
mayor.
run a municipality, exactly.
Yep. All right, we're going to close this thing down. We always end with our OGs and clowns of the week. What do you guys got?
I got to give a clown to Raja. I'm sure everybody saw his failed watch party, and the bottled water was $13. Unbelievable. I mean, especially considering how much money he spent on that race, and all of his supporters and volunteers are getting charged $13 for a bottle of water. That's absurd.
Yeah,
free drinks at Don Tracy's.
There you go.
Yeah.
Listen, this was one of my clowns. You got it first, but that's okay. I posted on Twitter on this based on Greg Pratt was the one who noticed this and put it out, and I retweeted it. And I said, here's the quote. Thanks, volunteers, for working for me. Now pay $13 for water. But I guess based on how Raja treats his staff, this shouldn't be surprising. I mean, listen, if there's a lesson here for you guys as candidates, your people have worked their butts off. Don't cheap out on the election night party. Even if you got a cash bar, at least give out some drink tickets. I could tell you story after story from my career in politics of candidates who cheaped out on election night, and their volunteers never forgot it. And the next election and the election after that, they remembered that you didn't care enough about them to buy them a couple drinks after they just volunteered for you. Don't be that candidate. Don't be Raja.
Yeah, and that was mine too, but more details, not just $13 bottles of water, $15 for a domestic beer, a Miller Lite, $18 for a Heineken, and $21.87 for one glass of wine. Probably cheap wine, like Barefoot wine or something, 21
He was
bucks.
probably getting a cut of the bar. I guarantee you, he thought he was going to be getting a cut of the bar victory party, and he was going to put that money back into the campaign account for the general election, which he's not going to.
Keep in mind, this is a campaign that spent $20 million on a primary Senate campaign. Insane.
Yep.
That is a hard act to follow, but I sort of have a hybrid clown and OG. I thought it was remarkable to think about Toni Preckwinkle's performance this week. So, she's off of just absolute botching every piece of Cook County government. Tax bills were late, these multi-billion-dollar overruns on contracts. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And she still finds a way to get 65% of the vote. I mean, I don't know how she does this, but I mean, it's talk about the power of a political machine that's organized. You can do everything wrong in your office and still get 65% of the voters to send you back.
Actually, Tom, I would argue I think Tony actually ran a pretty decent campaign. And I think her ad against Brendan Riley for his Trump ties was an incredible ad. I mean, I think that is why she got 65% of the vote. If Brendan Riley didn't happen to be Trump Towers alderman and had to have a relationship with Donald Trump, he would have broken 40%, even gotten as high as 45% of the vote, I think. But because she was able to actually directly tie, this wasn't like how Andrade was trying to tie his stupid primary opponent to Trump somehow. This was actually like a direct tie. So I think that's why Preckwinkle did as well as she did, because I think in a vacuum,
Chris, this is clowns and OGs. Come on, man.
Sorry, I haven't had talked about that race in a while, so sorry. I have a clown if Tom's done.
Yeah.
So Colin, you talked about this earlier in the week, but I'm going to steal it from you because I figure you're going to talk about it. My clown of the week is now failed 6th congressional district candidate Skylar Dunsing, who for whatever reason decided it was a good idea to call his opponent Niki Conforti a traitor to America because she happened to be getting coverage from Al Jazeera and happened to be getting support amongst the Arab American community in her district, which he would have needed in order to win the general election in that district. So this basically also goes out to all the Republicans who think getting Arab support means you're a traitor to America.
Mm-hmm.
Newsflash, everybody, it's not 2001 anymore. You can't talk like that and expect to win elections. So, Skylar Dunsing, you are this election's last week's clown of the week.
Chris, you did steal mine, but that's fine. I played on it in social media, so it's okay. But I had a two-parter. You stole the first half, so let me do the second half, because it isn't just about politics. These are still Americans. They are Arab Americans. And we're seeing right now in both Texas and Florida pushback because they want to exclude Islamic schools from the school voucher program, the federal school voucher program. If you believe in school choice, then you got to actually believe in school choice. That doesn't mean then that money can only go to your favored religious schools. That means, yes, it's going to go to public schools. That means, yes, it's going to go to Islamic schools. If you believe in school choice, then actually believe in school choice. This is what drives me crazy about conservatives right now. We claim to be based on policy. But then, oh, no, actually, no. We just want our favorite groups, not their favorite groups. No kings. We just want our king. School choice, but only we want you to choose our schools. Actually believe in the policies you're pushing, please, and stop excluding segments of our population just because you don't like them as much as other segments. Because, yeah, it's racist, and I'm sick and tired of it. What else you guys got? I can keep going. I got a few more. All right, I'm going to do some OGs, and this is just more on policy. These were going to be in our news you can use, but I kind of decided I'd use it here. It's a couple bills that I just really liked. Erica Harris, I want to give kudos to her. Senate Bill 2094, making it amending the Illinois Fiscal Note Act to guarantee that when a member of the Illinois General Assembly requests a fiscal note on legislation, that request has to be honored. It can't be dismissed by a chamber vote. I know this is inside baseball. Tom will get this, and maybe some of you others. But the reality is so many bills get passed in Springfield, and we have no idea what kind of a fiscal impact it's going to have, whether it's on the state or on the local level. And when Republicans, or sometimes Democrats, but mostly Republicans, say, hey, I'd like to know what that's going to cost, usually it's just a quick vote by the Democrats saying, no, sorry, not going to happen. It really would be nice if people knew what the cost of these bills were when they were passed. So kudos to Erica Harris. It won't go anywhere, but Senate Bill 29, I love it. And then this is Democrats, Senate Bill 3222, but I want to point to it as a good example. I think I've talked about this before. It's a bill. The Senate committee passed it. It will regulate loud commercials during streaming, because if you watch streaming at all, no matter how low you have the volume for the actual show you're watching, the commercials come on and it's 2 or 3 times the volume of the actual show you're watching. And I know we're small government Republicans. I get it. But honestly, these are the kind of things that impact people's lives that they end up caring more about than big taxation policy and immigration policy. They care more about, are the Bears going to leave Illinois? Is my streaming commercial going to be way too loud? And oh, you know what? So-and-so did something about it. Oh, that's pretty cool. I understand why Republicans don't look at stuff like this, but my goodness, guys, the things that make people's lives better are the things that are going to win you elections. Start focusing on ways to make Illinoisans' lives better, and maybe you'll win some more elections. And yeah, this is a dumb example, but maybe learn from it. Could help you out. I'll take a breath. I've got some clowns, but anybody else have anything else? Just don't want to dominate.
Well, one of the things that I saw that I thought was interesting, there were 33 jurisdictions, either counties or townships, that had a non-binding referendum on the ballot related to the federal school choice, tax voucher. All of them won overwhelmingly. So good on those county and township governments for putting that on the ballot, letting people make their voice heard, and it was resounding. I mean, all of them were 54% or higher, some as many as 80% were like, this is good.
Michael, only thing I'll say is I'd like to see what the turnout in those regions was, Republican versus Democrat, because you're talking about all those places. None of them were blue counties. None of them were purple counties. They were all
There were
red
some
counties and
townships in Cook that put it on.
that were conservative townships.
Well,
Red
sure.
townships.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean, listen, we got to do something. So I get it. I'm glad they're playing the game, but ultimately, what I'd like to see as a data guy is what's the baseline? What was the Republican versus Democrat turnout, and then how did this perform compared to that baseline? Now, that's data I'd really like to know.
Yep.
I have an OG, and I just heard it earlier today, and it's a ballot harvesting story, and it's the best one I've ever heard. So Michael Whatley, again, running for U.S. Senate, comes to Chicago. He used to be the head of he's head of the RNC. He spoke at the Peoria Lincoln Day last year. And he said in a race, I think it was in California while he was the RNC director, this group of people called the Republican Party and said, the Democrats used to pay us to ballot harvest for them, but this year they're running low on money. And we're wondering if you guys would like to pay us to ballot harvest for you. And Wiley said, well, no, we're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. However, we can pay you not to do it. And this group said, that's outrageous. We're going to sue you. We'll pay you 25% of what they paid you last time not to do it. So they said, we're going to sue you. We're going to take you to court. You're bribing us. This is ridiculous. How did you do this? But maybe for 50%, we would do it. And that's how the story ended. Again, it's not my story. Maybe I butchered it. But the point is, Democrats pay their people to do so much of the grassroots work. We don't. I'm not saying we should or ever should, but it's something that we need to think about how to get our volunteers to do what so many people on the left pay their people to do during election season.
Yeah, listen, I'll say this as a consultant. Maybe pay less on consultants. Maybe don't spend 25 grand a month on consultants and put that into your grassroots, your interns, and your field program. I think Chris and Michael would love hearing that out of me. A couple of clowns for me, and then we'll close this thing down. Of course, JB Pritzker, always going to be on my list. I've got a couple of things here. Number one, for calling outside groups that are investing in Illinois races interference. Listen, dude, anybody else says this, it's not hypocrisy, but JB Pritzker is just, he'll say anything because he's JB Pritzker. If you got a problem with outside groups playing in races, you're the king of that, literally the king of that. So maybe have some situational awareness. Also, his new TV ad, which is all about Trump, which of course we expected. Pritzker comes on and says, in Illinois, we're working to lower costs. Here's his 3 examples. Eliminating the state tax on groceries, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, and cutting taxes on working families. I want to ask working families in Illinois, are you paying less for groceries or are you paying more? Because his claim that he eliminated the state tax, well, guess what? The way he did it made municipalities put it right back on. He could have done it in such a way that actually would have eliminated it, but no, he just wanted the press pop so he could put it in this TV ad. You're still paying that state tax in most communities in Illinois because of the way he eliminated it. Are you paying less for prescription drugs now than you were? Has he cut taxes on working families? Or are you paying more in taxes right now? Pritzker is the king of putting this out, putting out a great message in his ads. And because Republicans don't have the ability to fight back, it holds, it works. But my goodness, if we could actually work back, I don't think there's a single working family, single person, especially in the suburbs, who's going to say they're spending less on groceries, less on prescription drugs, or less on taxes now. My next clown of the week, I backed him up. I defended them. So, Michael, have my back on this. I did defend the Freedom Caucus a little bit ago, but I do need to ding him on this. And I told him so directly. The graphic they put out after Josh Higgins won was, no sellouts, tax increases, woke mandates, no frauds, and they had a picture of Norine with a mask on her face with the word fired over her face. I know that race got super contentious, and I know you're upset because the House Republicans going after Josh for the arrest record from 15 years ago. I get that frustration, anger is high, but here's the deal, guys. If you want to be a real player in the state, you want to take over the House Republican caucus, you want leadership, then you've got to act like a leader. It's incredibly hard after a race to take the high road. But listen, both sides went hard at each other. Only one side gets to walk away with a win. The winner has to be the one that takes the high road. The winner has to be the one that says, good race, well fought, we're going to move on. When you get petty at the end after you've won, it's hard for people to say, sure, okay, fine, we'll give you the reins of whatever caucus or whatever it is you're looking for. Act like you've won before. Act like you've been there before. Take the high road. I didn't love that. I thought it was petty after a race that, yeah, I know the race was petty, but come on, be better than that, please. Last one. Yeah, my last one here. Champaign County. Listen, anytime you hear somebody do something crazy like, dude rode a buffalo to work one day, you know that's Florida. And anytime you hear a county had problems on election day or with their voting machines or with their ballots or the spelling of a candidate's name like Ted Dabrowski, you know it's always Champaign County. And it was yet again. Champaign County had to close 15 of their polling locations because they didn't recruit enough election judges. This just creates problems for your voters. And sure, they could go to another polling location, but this is unnecessary. If we're talking about making voting easy to access, here we have a Democratic county, a clerk's office controlled by a Democrat, making it harder for people to get out there and cast their ballots. Be better than that, especially when time after time, it's the Champaign County clerk who's got problems when it comes to elections.
I find it hard to believe that Champaign County can't find election judges. They have like U of I right there. Just go to the college and tell all these college kids you can make how much ever money just be an election judge for the day. That's like the easiest thing I've ever heard in the world. I should run for Champaign County clerk.
All right, let's close it down. We usually like to let our guests go last, so Michael and Chris, we'll have you guys go first. Michael, your final word.
Well, I did have a bet with Brad Nolhoff on the margin of the Meyer versus Meyer primary, and Brad Nolhoff was closer to the result than me. So I've got to say, Brad's a great county board member, and ski's my favorite soda. So that's my closing thought.
I got my political team out here making bets and losing bets. What's up with that? Come on, guys, do better. Chris, what's up for you?
I was 3 points off, so you know you gotta. He was closer.
At least you were honest and humble enough to admit it. Chris never admits when he's wrong and I'm right. Chris, what's your final word?
I never admit I'm wrong because I'm never wrong. I'm exhausted. You're exhausted watching this. Everybody in this panel is exhausted right now. If you're an operative out there, here's what you're going to do. You're going to get whatever work you need to get done to prep for the general election tomorrow. And then this weekend, you're going to go out there. You're going to play golf because it's supposed to be beautiful. You're going to enjoy St. Patrick's Day weekend again because we're having 2 of them this year. I declared it already. We're having 2 St. Patrick's Day weekends, and it's going to be fantastic. Enjoy yourself. Drink responsibly. Have fun and responsibility. Stay safe. Great work, everybody. Good election cycle.
All right, Mike, I'm glad you made it to the home studio. I'm glad you are safe. Thanks for joining us early from the road, but in the studio, give us your final thought.
Yeah, and as someone who has made a lot of podcasts and did radio for years, I apologize for all the tech stuff. I've been through it all, and it was Murphy's Law.
The good news is
yes.
Lane will clean it up, so nobody but us will know.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, 4 years ago, I ran for office, and it was a long primary, but a short general election for everyone who won the primary. It's the opposite this time. If you're watching this podcast and you're not involved at all in politics, you clearly want to be. You're clearly interested in it. You guys have a really good view count. You're reaching people who aren't just insiders. Look up your county, write Republican Party after it, and find out when their next meeting is and go to it. We need more precinct committeemen in this state. We need more people to volunteer. We need more people to get involved. We've got a long runway between now and November, and you watching this right now, you want to get involved, join your local Republican Party, become a precinct committeeman, and let's help get out the vote in November.
Tom, as always, we're glad to have you with us. You get the final word this episode.
All right, the first thing is, Michael, we got to tax you on that prediction market that you were a part of.
There was no money involved.
The second thing is, we do have a long general election cycle this time, as Mike mentioned. But as we also talked about, these districts are drawn to not be very competitive. We know what the statewide numbers have looked like. I think this is the opportunity that Republicans have to say, okay, we've got a little bit of time here. Let's try to think of something that's a little bit unconventional, a little bit outside the box. How can we try to put Democrats in a different position? We can't just run a conventional campaign this time because money, demographics, a lot of the maps, a lot of these things are against us. We got to be creative to win. We have a little bit of time to be creative. So let's start thinking about that.
I like it. Good advice. For those who watch and listen to us loyally and regularly, unless something major breaks next week, we're going to give Chris and Michael, and more importantly, Lane, a week off. So try not to make too much news, all you people out there in Illinois, over the next week. And if so, we will skip next week's SFR and be in your inbox in 2 weeks. Or if something breaks, we'll be back in your inbox. So we'll see. But either way, thanks for being with us throughout this election season. As Chris said, enjoy the weather. I finally got to have a cigar during one of these episodes. So we'll catch you at our next SFR episode. In the meantime, go enjoy Illinois.